We're feeling very Batman-y today.
For no reason. I just wasn't
right.
sure what to make my background, and it was so I went Batcave.
I'm trying to decide who that is. That's not...
That's a
like,
T-Rex.
I thought it was Robin.
On a very bad day. No, just like, what is that from? Is that... Because it feels...
Looks like New 52 to me.
Does it?
Type of style? Looks like it. I don't know.
It's got a bit of that.
But it feels... I'm looking. I'm catching the fin of the Batmobile right there, and it makes it feel a little more...
Should I just get out of the way?
Yeah, it's just
you're
just
kind of
leave
in the way,
there, actually,
Alanah.
that'd be. See, that's even a little bit movie, that Batmobile. That's a little bit.
I wouldn't even say New
89.
52. I would say that's older.
It could be older.
Sorry, I'm geeking out.
Are you
do
not,
sort of
are you
have
not
this-
sourcing your backgrounds with
There's no penny
meticulous...
for what it's worth. There's no penny.
I
but-
could check. No, I closed the link. I do sort of have this, like, I used to read a lot of comics and then caught myself down to only Batman because of time and money. Same as, like, I used to collect Magic the Gathering cards, and then it became a point where I was like, I should stop doing this. This is not a good idea.
This is not
for
my
me.
job.
Yeah, a lot of
treating
fun.
it as
But
such.
I still have like hundreds of cards in Australia, and my mom is always like, "Can I get rid of them?" And I'm like, "Not yet. One day."
One
But
day.
today is not the day that I'm willing to part with them. But I did end up having this beef around maybe like I don't know. I would say like 2006 or so, where a lot of comic art started to look exactly like what's behind me. Like, so much of the mainstream art started to look exactly the same, and I'm not entirely sure why it all started to look that way. Like, the shading was all exactly the same. Everything was very cool in hue, and
What time
everyone was doing
when
it.
was this? You said.
I'm
2006?
guessing when I was in the middle of high school, so that would be 2006-ish. But
I wonder if that's
don't know why.
the upswing of the digital coloring. I wonder if it's like that would have been
Maybe.
Been,
I mean, that's
I
That's
could have my
definitely
timing
when, like-
completely wrong, but
Yeah.
it definitely seemed like it all happened at the same time. Where
that would
they got less
coincide with
colorful.
when like Boom and Image and Vertigo really kind of started to take off as well. So you didn't have the mainstream guys, the Marvel and DC dudes were kind of over here, and then there was like, Brian Vaughan that was popping, and who was the colorist for that? Who did? I can't remember who did Why the Last Man.
The colorist. Yep. See, that's a unique art style. Like, I like that art style a lot. That doesn't look like everything that.
No, that's
Marvel
why
and
I
DC
really
like
started
that.
that 2008, 2009 is when
comes.
I started
looking for
moving
Why the
away.
Last
God damn,
Answer the
I'll
question.
cry right now.
Oh yeah, we can find out who the colorist is.
That's
We are
what
very
I'm doing.
anti-Google on this show, definitely. Don't know
What I
why.
don't
And,
understand
and that's what we
is-
call Mike, by the way.
Goddamn see it. That's the problem.
I never understand your batting average for having a relevant book
750.
is pretty damn high, despite the
Yeah.
fact that bookcase doesn't look like it could hold more than like 100 books. So
It's 40%
It's
jars
magic.
of we still haven't determined what's in those.
I think it's Lego.
We have
Yeah,
that.
it's
We can
Lego.
find that. It's Lego.
Yeah.
I can't see my copy of Why the Last Man.
I'm always curious about why there are shoes on there.
I also want to.
That I'll show you. They're lovely. They were custom shoes made by someone for me. A fan made them and sent them to me.
Oh, that's cool.
Thomas was alone.
Oh my god.
Oh wow, that's really good.
Volume. Isn't that nice?
Oh wow, that's
Wow.
awesome. Yes, they belong
I
on
had
the
someone
shelf.
make me custom Jordans that were Hawkeye inspired,
Wow.
Nice.
and someone told them, they're like, "We got your shoe size." I was like, "Are you serious?" And someone gave them the wrong shoe size, so I've never worn them. But they're awesome. They're like purple.
What are you, like a 13?
No.
Like a 10?
12,
Like
all
12.
except for
wasn't that far off.
one pair. My wife got me for Christmas. She got me the Jubilees, the 25th anniversary ones that I've always wanted. They're the ones that I would literally want to go to all the cool kids in high school right now and go, boom, bitches, because I finally got them.
And they'd be like, "Why did you break into our house, sir?"
Yeah, they're like, "Do you don't remember who I am?" I'm like, no, we
No,
didn't go to
what?
high school together, do we? No, I apologize. By the way, your phone's ringing. It's the security company. They want to know what the password is. I
at least
I
we
got
know
those
that person did pretty well in life and is not relying on police first, and has
That is
private,
true.
No.
Private
private
security.
security.
Yeah.
yeah.
I had to climb a gate in that
Yeah,
hypothetical. There were two Dobermans in that whimsical story I made up just now. No, but they're the only
yeah.
ones that are 12 and a half.
For
So
legal
if you're watching
purposes,
this,
made up.
size 12s in Jordans.
And I'm actually gonna write that down. If I have to buy
That's
you
useful
a
information.
gift, bitch. You getting a fucking gift that's in a 12.
If you want to buy me Jordans, I would love that.
So that's
But
the
what's
thing.
weird
is all my
is
friends
all
who like
my, like,
Jordans, I buy it for
trainers-
them all the time.
My like proper running trainers, those are all 12 and a half.
So to be clear, Troy mentions his shoe size.
Hat size is 7 1/8.
I bought this myself.
Thank you for supporting the show.
I'm just gonna point out.
Doing your bit for
Well,
charity.
okay, but I did buy you guys the merch because Troy still hasn't given me his dress.
I swear
did
to
have to pay for
shit.
that. You didn't.
You're right. Actually, I do have the sweater right on the other side of the piano here.
The
I'll have to
sweater's
send you guys
good,
new ones for the
actually.
new design. They're really
Please
nice
do.
materials. Go to
warm. It's
redbubble.com/people/playwatchlisten, I think. I don't remember, but we have merch. It's been very cool to, because this show is largely taken swing during the pandemic. People like post photos and occasionally will tag me with it, but I've not seen anyone in person. And I was thinking about that. If like the first time that I see someone in the real world who's wearing Play, Watch, Listen shirt or something will probably be a very emotional moment for me.
That's going
Caught
to
in the wild.
terrify me.
I
I run away at that point.
good friend of mine who's a game developer messaged me a photo of her laptop today, and the back of it is completely covered in stickers, and there was a little Play, Watch, Listen sticker recently added to join the repertoire alongside like GDC stickers, which made me shed a tear. But
R.I.P.
but
bud.
yeah.
From what I've heard on the inside, Gamescom is expected to come back in full swing this year. They are expecting Gamescom to be open.
Isn't
and I
it
was-
like September range?
August
Gamescom is
usually.
packed. Gamescom is like
I mean, it is
300,000
There's no
people.
way.
It makes
Yeah, no way.
San Diego look like sparse.
That's not happening. And if it does, then that will be the cause of the next wave of the pandemic.
Yeah,
What
we'll
is
stay
the-
there
what is
forever
the
because of
point?
Gamescom.
Like, what do they benefit from that? Is it not just like, think about the millions of dollars that are being saved, also not generated for specifically Cologne, but I bet Cologne just breathed a communal
city.
sigh of relief.
The city,
They
to
were
be
like,
clear.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah, not
Gamescom is not a cologne
No.
and perfume.
Honestly,
nobody
it could
uses
do with a little
Gamescom.
bit more cologne. Some of those rooms. at
smells like
Gamescom.
disappointment.
Gamescom is the
No, I mean,
stinkiest of all the
It
conventions.
is.
It really
It's so well. I have a problem with GDC because it often rains at that point of the year in San Francisco, so it's really humid indoors in GDC, so it gets really stinky.
That
But-
point of the day. It rains at that point of the day at GDC.
That time of the year, but it gets real smelly. But I was gonna say with Gamescom, I imagine that everyone in the city of Cologne was like, well, it is nice to have a break for a year because, we kind of go in
hate
there
us.
and overtake everything. Yeah, it's not
Can
great.
you imagine just the day after when they just look at the remains of their desecrated hamlet of a village. It's not a large town.
No.
It's incredibly small. And they're just like, look what they...
hundreds of
did.
thousands of branded T-shirts just
Yeah.
hanging from the.
And the
Lanyards
bags
everywhere.
Yeah,
just like thrown. Just
Yeah.
That's just kind of like the sort of like the Olympics on a order of magnitude smaller scale. But I've always read that the Olympics it's strange how cities compete for them, but it's a well-known thing that it's very economically damaging to the cities that host the Olympics because they invest.
true?
I've always heard that. I can't offer you a citation in this moment, but I've always understood that they invest billions in the infrastructure of hosting all these people, hosting these athletes, all the various equipment, media, all that. It's a giant circus, like literally millions of people and thousands of athletes and all of that, and it just can't possibly recoup.
But specifically for London, that like overhauled London. That is when the city expanded the most to the east. Like the Docklands became
Yeah.
incredibly accessible.
That doesn't mean it
Heathrow.
was
Magic
profitable.
London at the time, it was massive. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
brother-in-law works in that industry, and I know specifically for Sydney, they used it as an excuse to create facilities that the city really needed. So
Yeah, same
Olympic
thing with
Park in
Heathrow.
Sydney, it's still very frequently used. Like it's used for concerts, it's used for our video game expos, or it was. I think they shut those down, but they're also housing out there. So they used it well. But I mean, I think that was the year 2000. So it's like I
I've
would
been out to
imagine
those
further
grounds. Yeah, that's
Probably,
where
yeah.
Supernova was.
back. Yeah.
It
I
looks
think
like
it
a
still is.
compound.
It does look a bit like a compound, but that's
It
because
could
was
very
a
well
track.
be. It could very
Some
well
people
be
probably
that
do it well, some don't.
that may be the reason why they justify the expense is that they will gain something. It's a loss leader on something that will have long-term value.
I think that's
but
what it is. And I mean, just the
Political
boom in the
justification as
industry,
well.
right?
Yeah.
It sells the town out, right? So like it's all tourists that come in,
but not profitably is the thing, because
Really?
that's what I've always heard. Again, I could be completely wrong, but it does seem to make an intuitive amount of sense, just given the insanity. And they probably have all these deals, I'm sure there's a lot of folks that are coming in with various sweetheart deals that they would lose money on, just all the various governments. And it's because it's so unique. There's no event like it, with literally hundreds of individual governments and visas and all that. Just think of the insanity. It's really I've never been. I've always thought it would be interesting to go to the Olympics, just if only to behold in person the madness of it. It's I just think of, like, Spaniard, 50,000 Romans following the movement of your sword. Like, it just feels like the most insane thing.
Just how long it's been around, and like thinking about the way that it's evolved. Everyone used to be naked.
When did the recent version start, though? Because it's not been going the whole time.
30s, right?
It was the 30s, right?
Yeah,
the
I think
Nazis
so.
brought it back,
I thought it was earlier. I thought it was earlier than that, but it was 20th century.
It was Hitler that brought it back, but actually, you know what? In the 1936 Olympics, when Hitler says, "I declare these Olympics open," I think
that might
could
be
just
the
mean
thing.
hosting them.
And then Jesse Owens won the.
I think that might. I'm going to look it up because.
Yeah. Okay. This didn't feel right. 1896.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
In
So
Athens.
then, what was
So
the
they
big deal? I guess that besides
Because
the
I
big
think
deal,
they were in Berlin, were they not?
they were in Berlin, and that was the first. I think I know this because of Contact.
I was going to say, I see this coming.
That was the first television transmission.
No, it wasn't. I think it was just the highest powered at that time.
Highest powered.
Wow.
Is that what it was? That's the one that could reach out into space, and so that's what in Carl Sagan's book the aliens threw back at us. They were like, "Here you go." I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, it's a great.
That
I love
moment
that
in the movie is so good too. They like turn it upside down and it's going this way.
I love that moment, though. That's a perfect moment. That's actually an amazing moment of when dispassionate scientific inquiry meets ideological blindness, where instantly all the government people are like, "Uh-oh, fucking aliens must be Nazi sympathizers. We've lost Troy."
Austin,
Just
can I just
observing
say
from a safe
that
distance.
I love the first part of that sentence was so eloquent. It was beautifully phrased, and then the second half was like, and then the government people are like, fucking aliens.
Hey, we got some fucking aliens over here.
I am a believer in the heterodox, even within myself. I will pivot left and
wonderful.
right. Yeah, but no, it's amazing. I just recently rewatched that movie, and I love where they fight it and they say, it's just the luck of the draw of the transmission. They don't even know what they're sending back, and all the military people feeling very suspicious over that conclusion, having a hard time trusting it. And I feel like, and the funny thing is, if you made that movie now, I think the general sort of electrified nature of everything would
General electrified nature.
all of
Signing
that
in
is
for
so much
Photogrammetry.
more amplified.
I'm going to intro the show right now. We're at 15 minutes.
Aw,
Wow, that's
man.
good.
That's
I
good
just
for
feel
us.
like there's so much stuff that we could be talking about this week, and
I know Emma Watson isn't retiring.
All the news happened this week, and we're talking about.
But
I
I
know.
will say that there was, by and large, I did the combing through the comments, the comment combs, and people loved we thought you were going to talk about this and you didn't, and people were
Yeah,
like,
I'm never
"Hey."
changing it. I'm never going to make it more structured. I think I told someone to watch a different show. I was like,
Yeah,
"It's not
go.
gonna change." Leave.
Greg Miller does some video game stuff you should check out. By all means, please, Alanah. I apologize for interfering.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alanah, PS video game writer. That's Troy Baker, video game actor. That is Austin Wintory, video game composer. And that's Mike Biddle, video game director. Did you guys see the PlayStation conference?
Yes.
I don't think I did. I'm not prepared for this at all.
It's all right. It was only like half an hour and no major news.
Okay.
I watched
they
the
pitched
trailers,
Horizon
but I
again,
didn't
right?
watch the
Is there anything else
presentation.
that came out of that other than the
There-
Horizon?
There was no Horizon, actually.
There was no
Oh, really?
Horizon.
Oh, okay. I just figured
No.
because that's
There
the
was
one coming
just-
out this year, right?
Constant.
Deathloop. There was more Deathloop, which,
Oh, okay.
my gosh, I'm excited about that game.
Looks great.
So into it. And
I have a question about that.
yes.
Did it I love the kind of the Bond treatment that they gave it.
Yeah.
But the flipping back and forth between styles, I don't know if it was like, here's our key art, here's our graphics, here's our key art, here's our graphics, and they, at some point, they felt like it was, I maybe it's my ignorance, but I felt like the message was getting mixed in that of going, I understand that this looks like this because it's a first-person shooter, I get it, but then you're also presenting this super stylized thing as a layer on top of it, so I just didn't understand.
I think that probably happened because they've shown this game a lot. So they had to do something different. The game's been shown at the last like 3 or 4 conferences. So the addition of the style is definitely for the song to make it very Bond-ish, which I really liked. But the gameplay looks like the bits that look kind of like Dishonored. It is arcane. But I'm very excited about it. I think it looks so cool, and I love the idea of like Hitman meets Bond, sort of. Which, you know, they are working on, meets Dishonored. Like, just so cool. Very excited to play it. Also, like, the news that I think Ratchet is going to be on PS Plus for a while, and I always feel like I want more people to play Ratchet and Clank as a franchise that is already extremely popular. I'm like, but it's also way better than you think it is. It's like, Ratchet is very good.
I have never played that.
Ratchet
That's one of
Any
those.
of them?
That's
I
no,
played the
none
first.
of them. I don't think
the first
so.
one, and then the new one that they what was it?
Cracking Time?
Yeah, Kraken Time, whatever.
I think.
I played that when it came out for a hot second.
Very pretty. Very
2002 was the first one. Yeah, it's one of those that I've
Pixar-esque.
always been aware of, and somehow every time I've sort of been busy, and then it retreated over the horizon and escaped notice once
I mean,
again.
they are kids' games. Like, that is a
All
a
games
thing.
are for kids. Grown-ups read books.
All right,
Alanah.
George Lucas.
Best motion
Made a
blur
Star
in the
Wars
business
reference,
as
it
well.
counts.
Best
I
motion
like
blur
it.
in the business, Insomniac, with those games. They just look. That's what gives them that kind of pre-rendered quality, is the beautiful mocap. No, sorry, not mocap, but motion blur.
Interesting.
Looks
That is
lovely.
the thing that I feel like different games have been toying with recently, more so. Oh, maybe it's just that I started streaming more. But I feel like I often have people ask me to turn motion blur off. And it's
That's
a thing
because
that I feel like
there's
I didn't
Here we go.
notice
So
it.
there's a couple of different versions. There's like motion blur as a post effect, which is all the camera, and then there's per object motion blur, which is so.
You
there's
wouldn't be able to
actually-
turn that off.
Is that baked into the?
Well, you could turn it.
animation?
You could turn off either. No, you can turn off either. But basically, it's to do with how you render it and which order you render in. Motion blur, in kind of the way we kind of had it in kind of, I think Orange Box probably was like most people's first exposure to it, was like in Portal, the original Portal. I remember like lots of motion blur as you move the camera around. That's a post effect that you kind of do to everything.
What's the
per
purpose of
object
it?
motion? What's the purpose of it?
It looks more real, right?
It looks smoother. Is honestly the trick. It kind of hides 30.
Trying to figure out
FPS
if I have
quite
motion
nicely.
blur when I look around. I guess.
Well,
You're full 90 frames a second.
Oh, we can go there. Do we want to talk about like how your eyes lie to you all the time? Have you
I
ever
think we did
done the
speak
thing?
about that recently, but not in terms of motion blur.
Have you done the thing where you look in a mirror? Have you done the thing where you look in a mirror and look at one eye and then look at the other eye, or actually just do it now with your webcam and look? Oh, you can't do it. Next time you're in front of a mirror,
Do it on my phone.
like look at a mirror, right? Look at one eye, and then look at your other eye, and you won't see your eyes move between the two eyes, because when your eyeballs move, your brain stops taking essentially like a video feed from them. Otherwise, you get motion sick all the time. So when
I
you
mean, I
dart
can
your
see
eyes
that
around
both
a
my
room,
eyes move.
Here's the question: Is
they move,
this...
but you won't see the transition between you won't see the eyeball actually. You will with the camera because of lag. If you're doing it on a camera, you won't. If you look in a mirror, you won't see your eyes moving because your brain. If you think about like just in your room now, look at one thing over there and then look at another thing over there without moving your head, just your eyes. You don't see a blur, right? You don't see a motion blur because your eyes switch off in that gap. Your brain knows that when your eyeballs are moving, it shouldn't be taking video, and you're unconscious of it. You're unaware of it, but it means you're not seeing that motion taking place. Your brain switches off in those moments. So if you look in a mirror, like get up close to a mirror, look at one of your eyeballs, look at the other eyeball, you won't see your eyes swivel. You'll just see your eyes staying still and jumping from one view to the other because your brain switches off when your eyeball's moving.
Do you know that because it became necessary for you to
I was
know
going to
that,
ask that too.
or was that just like...
I'm a big fat nerd. I'm just a big
Just like
fat nerd.
eyes.
I think that one actually. I think I saw.
I think you're a very
in...
svelte nerd, if I may say.
Oh, that's very kind. It's untrue, but I appreciate it. The I think that one.
The
I
nicest
got from...
way of calling someone a liar.
I think that one I got from. So there's a thing in the UK, which is the most UK thing now I think about it. There's a thing called the Christmas lectures, which is like science for kids. I think I remember seeing on one of those as a kid.
The morning of December 25th at every home.
Lectures have begun before Boxing Day.
It is on Boxing
All
Day,
right,
I
children,
think, on
sit
TV.
down. I'm going to read
It's
you a
true.
lecture. This is, of course, about the species
okay.
found in the aquatic
This one
species
is
found
about motion blur.
Indian
It's
news.
true, that one is. But that's what's interesting about motion blur and why it annoys a lot of people, because motion blur, when it's full screen, when it's tied to camera, you're basically simulating how it looks when a film camera moves around very quickly. Your head, when you're looking around, you don't see motion blur unless you're moving your head really fast. If you move your eyeballs, you won't see it. So it's kind of it's weird, and your brain knows you're watching a video rather than, which is fine, and it kind of gives everything a smoothness. Per object motion blur is cool because that's where you literally are just blurring the object. So the hand moving back and forth, you're blurring, but you're not blurring my face at the same time because my face isn't moving, which is again similar to how things look on film, but essentially just a different process, a more expensive process, because you have to isolate different parts of objects and know how fast they're moving in order to get that effect. So it's harder to do, but
You
it
have to
looks
blur
better.
the hand as well, right?
You're blurring the hand basically as it moves around, yeah. But you're not blurring the whole screen. So the cheapest way to do motion blur in a video game is just to basically take the last 2 frames that you rendered and then basically render them on top of what you're
Look
currently
insane.
rendering.
This whole episode, I'm just sort of. I
It's
can
it.
see
I
motion
feel like we
blur
do
if I
that
move
a
my
lot.
own hand.
That could be a super cut.
You're missing
of
out,
us doing that.
Spotify.
It's great.
I
So when you say Ratchet and Clank looks Pixar, I would say a large proportion of what's giving you that vibe that you're watching a pre-rendered film is that per object motion blur, because that's something that only the last Ratchet and Clank kind of introduced that with games, and it's in lots of games now, but it's a cool thing. Sorry. I
Oh,
apologize.
teacher.
Austin, go ahead.
Miss Clifton. Miss Clifton. Miss Clifton.
I butchered that
Miss Lipton,
explanation,
Miss
by the way. The
Lipton,
comments
Miss
are
Lipton,
full
Miss
of people
Lipton, Miss
correcting.
Lipton.
Yeah, Troy,
I
go
love
ahead.
that I get your references.
Go ahead.
I was actually going to be on point.
I was
gonna say-
called on, for fuck's sake.
Oh, I thought you were just doing that just to piss me off. Go
Children,
ahead.
calm down. Austin, go ahead.
No. Troy's right. He was here
fuck's
first.
sake.
I did have a question, but I will try desperately to
I
remember
was going to
it.
ping off the Pixar thing, so but that could potentially move us away from this. So if you have something else to add, I would by all means not.
Well, every word out of my mouth runs the potential of taking us off subject, so
That is true. It is a risk.
I'm self-aware enough. The way that you phrased it, Mike, of our eyes lying to us, and just the shortcuts that basically all of our biology is taking at all times, right? It's kind of related to the earlier conversations about evolution. And it's funny how I love conversations like this that are unpacking all of the crazy shortcut, like one I feel like we've mentioned it here before, but the fact that we have essentially a blind spot in the center of our eye in our field of view, that our brain is sort of
constantly trying to judge.
It's
Deleting the
Well,
nose,
that's-
basically, right?
that's separate. But yes, the idea that all of our hardware is basically designed to work just well enough. That's the whole MO of evolution, which is why to me it's always fascinating that the notion of eyewitness testimony, and the fact that we think that that's a good thing to lean on and hinge our especially criminal justice of all things, but even just the I know what I saw. It's
I've
like
watched so
12
many
Angry
forensic.
Men. That was the
so
whole
many
point
forensic
about it.
files episodes where they've been wrong. Like the person who was attacked and stabbed is like, I remember his face, and then they blame the wrong guy. No, you
well, and
don't.
there's so many
I went
studies.
Henry Ford, Spencer Tracy on that. I just want to point out that that's how old I am. I was like, yeah, that movie that movie that just got out of the picture house just now, the 12 Angry Men. Great movie if you've never watched it.
It is
a fantastic
spectacular.
play and a wonderful movie.
Well, but the theaters are closed, so we can't go see it, Troy.
We'll go see it on the
no other way to watch a movie.
on the video store that lives on the computer.
Go to Blockbuster, pick it up.
Austin, did you say you had a question?
I had a question.
Troy
No,
should
you had a
go.
tangent. Troy had a
Austin has
Austin
more
had
of a
question.
statement.
I thought that was your point. I don't want to impose.
No, it's a rabbit hole of just thinking about the
Lie to me.
The challenge of eyewitness testimony on the basis of all these various things, because of the fact that you can overtly plant false memories in people.
Oh yeah.
And anyway, but it truly is a rabbit hole. I wasn't even thinking of it that way, but as I'm saying it out loud, I'm realizing it is a full about face. So I'm going to be quiet. And
Proud
Troy,
of you. Look at you go.
Look at you.
I know.
I was actually
because I had to
gonna-
raise my hand. I felt like there were stakes now.
I'm going to play teacher's pet, and I felt like there's this new, or not a new necessarily, because obviously the games that we saw have been in development longer. I would think longer than COVID, right?
Yeah. I'd imagine so.
AAA,
for all
you
of them,
might. AAA, I would say probably they all started before COVID. Still, if we're seeing them now,
Which we didn't
India.
see many AAA, right? We saw two, maybe.
I was saying this when I was watching it, that like, what does it even mean anymore?
Budget
Like-
and scope, right?
Like in theory,
the lines are blurring for sure.
you could say that
Yeah.
some of those games, like Returnal, if it was published, is AAA, but it's not, because it's Housemarque, and they're not a AAA studio, so it's like, I don't even fucking know anymore.
But my point for that was that there was this big trend that I saw yesterday. You said Pixar style, and there was a lot of high fidelity stylized art. Not it was photoreal, like everybody was going photoreal, right? You had Death Stranding, and you had even from Uncharted 4 on, it was like, holy shit, man, that looks like a real person. And then we see this trend based on what we saw yesterday of a lot of like more stylized, cartoonish, Pixar-y. It might as well have been the latest Pixar movies coming out. I didn't know if that was a result of, we talked about the PS5 being able to have kind of level the playing field for studios having access to almost the same tools by which to create incredible looking graphics. Not necessarily photoreal, but you could, Studio A, that's like a Naughty Dog or whatever, or Studio B, that's more of a triple I or even a smaller indie, now has the same kind of, they're all dealing with the same engine. It's the Pine Derby kind of deal. Everyone's playing with the same tools. Is that why? Or is there something about COVID that said we need to scale the way, we need to change our animation style? There's a show that I'm on right now that hasn't chosen, we've already started recording, and they haven't chosen their animation studio yet. So I was like, that seems like that would be the first thing that you would do. But I just didn't know if COVID kind of drove that trend or if that trend was already in place.
I think it's actually the other viral sensation of Fortnite. If you look at the dates, I would guess, because you have fashion,
Interesting.
basically. When you're pitching games, which is something, unfortunately, I had to do many times in my career, you're always trying to make the business case, like, give us some money.
It's
we'll
this
make you
plus
some money.
this
Yeah.
put through the lens of this.
And,
Okay.
like, if you look at, like, the breakout kind of hits of the last 5 years, there's actually not many photoreal games in there. Like, in terms of, like, the things that have, like, dominated the conversation or kind of creatively made a big impression in that sense. Like, obviously, lots of amazing photoreal games have come out, but if you think about, like, what have we got? Like, Fortnite is obviously the current and new hotness, but Fortnite's been around now for a surprisingly long amount of time. They have managed to achieve longevity. I remember going into rooms on John Wick when we were working on John Wick, and film execs asking me, like, so is this like Fortnite? And it's like, no, I'll be honest with you, it's nothing like Fortnite, you know, and having that conversation. That was the game that people who don't play games had heard
Know
of,
what it is,
in that
yeah.
era.
And what they
And I
do
think-
is so impressive. Like the
it was,
announcement of the
it-
Alien stuff yesterday, the Travis Scott thing. Like Fortnite does a lot of
They're
very
brilliant.
impressive
They're
stuff as a
killing
platform.
It's amazing. But I
Troy
wonder
told me
if
to say that.
What's that?
that feels
Troy
it's
told me
cool.
to say that.
It's
You know what's
I think
so
that's
funny?
more likely. That's the impact, because even before that, you had like, I'm trying to think of, like, I guess PUBG was kind of photoreal, but then, like, definitely very indie, kind of not like cutting edge graphics, right? I feel like the case for we need to do photoreal has faded, and possibly the case for we need to stand out has improved. And I think I wouldn't pitch a photoreal game right now, because I think the market's showing us that isn't the road to run towards. Like, that's not
interesting. Because of perception, or because of, is there any like cost? Like, it's so expensive to do that, or is that because
I think it's
of PS5?
perception. I think the industry. I don't know if you guys can hear. There's like a really loud drilling sound. Apologies if it's coming up in the show at all. But I think it's fashion. I think honestly, like, execs in the games industry are exactly as what's the word? Observant of trends. That's a good way of putting it. As players probably expect, in that, like, if they see thing over here making lots of money, then, as you say, it's kind of the pitch is, we're going to do that, but we're going to flip it in this way. So then there's that.
Does that frustrate you, though? Because how could you be those trends? You're observing something in the past.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, you're always looking backwards, and that's flawed. I get it, though. Like, if I was spending millions of my own money on projects, I would probably be careful, and I'd probably base that on what I thought would make money, and I'd have to look at what was doing well. The other thing that I think is interesting is I think there is a technical reason coming up that's interesting, and I think maybe this is getting the jump. And the technical reason is photoreal's about to get cheap, and that's a really interesting aspect, I think, of this conversation. We're not there yet by any means, but if you look at things like
those Tom Cruise deepfakes would disagree. Those are pretty.
My God.
But that's honestly the AI side of it is a part of it. Like, if you look at photogrammetry, if you look at AI and the production of kind of photoreal content via computing power, essentially, which obviously is always getting cheaper. If you look at specifically photogrammetry is the one that jumps out at me. If you look at things like Epic's humanoid character thing they dropped a couple of weeks ago, that's beautiful. Can't remember what it's called. There'll be a million comments pointing to it.
You can hear the drill now.
You can hear the drill now. That's it's horrible. It's messing my brain. Basically, we may be approaching a time where photoreal is actually cheaper than stylization, and at that point, if you're a company where your differentiator is you have budgets, i.e. AAA, how do you show off your budget? How do you use your budget in a way an indie can't? You don't do photoreal. The joke with games has always been that the things that are really, I think we've said this on the show before, the things that are really easy to do, cheap to do with film, are most expensive in games, and vice versa. I can make a city being destroyed by a spaceship much more easily than I can make two people in a room talking to each other and having an emotional kind of scene together. That might be about to flip. A lot of technology lines are kind of converging, which imply to me that photoreal might be an aesthetic that's realistically approachable for an indie. At which point, if I've got 30 million to spend on a game,
a follow-up.
I go to stylization. That's what differentiates me. We might be at a point where, in the same way as Disney animation is a really expensive way to make a story for kids, right? But they have the money and resources to do that, so the differentiation is actually to go stylized, not photoreal, which would just be a children's film, which is much cheaper to produce. That might be about to flip, but that's years away. We're not there yet, I don't think.
Is there a version of this, looking from a dev side? Is there an attraction? Several years ago, Joe Madeira came in and created the aesthetic for Darksiders. Like, he was the one who...
I love Joe Mad. Huge fan.
So do I. And
also, I've always pronounced that Madureira. Huh? I've always pronounced his last name Madureira.
To his face?
I don't think I've ever said it to his face.
I think that's why he just goes Joe Mad. Is there a world where, instead of getting, and this is not disparaging against, but instead of getting Norman Reedus, instead of getting Keanu Reeves,
beat me to it.
Instead of getting Greg Miller,
you
get Scott Snyder, you get Joe Mad, you get like whoever you get Guillermo del Toro, you get these people that becomes your big celebrity star draw that you get instead of the actor, because it's no longer about the photorealness of them. It is about the design, the unique aesthetic,
I worked on a game called Absolver by the studio Slow Clap that also had the Kung Fu game in the
so cool.
rundown yesterday. I didn't work on it, for the record. I love them though; they're fantastic. They oh dear,
you're right.
Earthquake.
Oh God.
That was very strange. A lot of things had to
See, that would have
converge
been
for
very
that to happen.
expensive to achieve.
Yeah, the motion blur there.
I was going to say,
that
how'd
would
you
have
enjoy
been
the
very
motion blur?
difficult, you know.
I didn't see it.
The again, another Spotify moment of curiosity.
Austin's webcam fell.
Yeah,
There you go.
and now it's all akimbo. But because it's resting on my piano, and so like it's pushing down the G natural, which like tilts. Anyway, the slow clap team. I remember when they were in the early days on Absolver, they went to like Milan or somewhere, or they were planning. The details are fuzzy because it's years ago, but they basically were hiring a fashion designer to help design their character avatars. And that was going to be one of their big, marketing conceptions of the game, is that we went to one of these, when you look at these really ultra sort of almost borderline avant-garde runway shows where their outfits are just these absolutely over the top and crazy detailed and really amazing. Some of these outfits are just so wild and imaginative, and they were like, that's the kind of mind we want to help do our character creation, that they're not thinking in terms of game design or animation hookups or rigging and all that kind of stuff. They just think in terms of fabric and light, and I thought that was a really cool way, and I could see how that might be a thing, that we've got so and so designer.
Austin, I feel like you are kind of that. Like, to Troy's question of, like,
I am
is this
clearly a man of
specifically-
discerning fashion.
A fashionable gentleman.
Troy's question is about
Troy
about-
just died inside, I think.
is about
about
art,
off-screen
obviously.
talent.
But I think that when you have Austin Wintory as your composer, that is a distinct choice that you are making. There was a
Very
game in the
ill-advised
conference
one.
yesterday, the follow-up to Hyper Light Drifter. I don't remember what it's called, but I was like, this is an
Solar Ash.
Austin Wintory ass game. Because there's a style of video game that you are frequently attached to, and a type of
For the
music.
record, a good friend and fabulous composer is scoring that game, Rich Vreeland, aka Disaster Piece, who has also done Hyper Light Drifter before with those guys.
which is also a great game.
and
Composer.
tremendous score.
Where do I know Disaster Piece?
He did Fez.
That's what I'm
Oh.
thinking of.
He also did
Yeah.
the movie It Follows, which
Oh,
was
really?
his kind of big foray into film. Yeah, he's amazing.
Dope score. Interesting. movie.
He's everything he's done, but Hyper Light
It's
is
no
for me
Hotline
his-
Miami
his
2,
big-
but
no, nothing is.
Yeah, exactly. It's an outlier in the data. Just ruins
I think,
your averages.
but I think you're right about Austin. Like, I think ultimately what you're talking about is already happening. We just don't have an audience who's literate, and not through fault of their own, because those people haven't been put in front of cameras and
It's
made
also not
known.
been
Like,
pushed
we
that
still-
way. That's
Yeah.
what Kojima has been trying to do. Is well, actually, I know EA did it back when it started. They tried to pitch their dev teams as boy bands. They tried to have photo shoots with their entire team where they all look
They
cool
were
and are sitting on
electronic
couches.
artists, right? That was how it
They
started.
were.
Electronic
They tried to
artists,
make
yeah.
them seem like they were bands where you would know all of their names and you would know everyone who worked on anything. I mean, it certainly happened with Doom. The creators of Doom, everyone knows their names, or almost people
Sure.
do, not the mainstream, obviously. But that is a thing that they tried to push, and it didn't work when the teams became too big, I think. But Kojima has certainly tried to do that in that direction of like having the opening credits of showing his name 4 times, but also a lot of other people's names in that process. And I think it is ultimately dev teams being too big for that to really take off. But it's not. Yeah, it's not that those designer choices don't exist, because I would say Austin Wintory is a designer choice.
It's funny because it's interesting how, I mean, on the one hand, that's probably not a bad thing. Like I would anytime, like, any conversations in the Hollywood world become about, how do you avoid, or I should say a common recurring thread is, how do I avoid becoming typecast? Because this is sort of an offshoot of what you're saying. Oh, well, you're the person who always works on such and such, or you always write music that sounds like such and such. And the conventional wisdom would be, it's a very luxurious problem to be typecast, because getting cast is problem number 1. And if you can actually get over that sufficient to now be repeatedly called to do the same thing, that means the word's out on you that you're really good at that thing.
I don't think all your music sounds the same, though. My suggestion is more that you are often paired with games that have not even a consistent style, but very distinct style. Like, I would think that if I heard that you were attached to a game, I would be like, okay, I'm probably going to enjoy this game. Which, for a composer, is a pretty, huge link to make. But
So
I
this is-
still think that if I had
this
heard
is-
Austin Wintory compose this, okay, I know what Austin's kind of taste is, and I'm probably going to like the game that he worked on.
what you're describing
although,
as well is like auteur theory as it originally, one of the original meanings of auteur theory. We now think of auteur theory as like person who's in charge. My video has gone completely out of sync.
It has.
I'm going to stop and restart.
Again, motion blur.
yeah.
There we go. Like, auteur theory doesn't necessarily mean person who is most important. It can mean person who you identify with things you like. So a good example of this for me is I have a weird, like, thing where if Ryan Gosling's in a film, I will enjoy that film. I might not love Ryan Gosling in that film, but something about the way he and his agents select movies is an indicator that I will like that movie. Like, it's a joke. It's a joke now that I will actively go and find Ryan Gosling films because I know he'll pick movies I would like to see. And I think that's what you're basically describing. That's what you're saying
we'll
about
save that
Curated
for
type
a different episode.
Yeah, it's more of a curation type thing in the case of Austin. I'm definitely.
That's
not
what you're saying. Is
it's-
Austin chooses
yeah.
the kind of projects you would like.
Yes.
Although it's worth saying that there are plenty of projects that composers in particular are susceptible to this phenomenon, but I think everybody is as well, where, you know, you attend those initial meetings and it's, here's the thing we're going to make, and everyone's real excited, and then flash to 2 years later and it's kind of drifted off course, and by the time it ships it's like, well, this is really not the same thing that everybody was sort of assuming it would be. And so it's a I think a kind of undue leap of faith to say, oh, well, you know, he sure can pick I basically see it from the other angle, that I've been very lucky that the games that I've worked on have a better than 50% average of turning out pretty damn good. But that's not thanks to me or even my discerning taste. In fact, the game is rarely ever the thing that makes me say yes. It's always who I'm working with. You know, I would so much rather.
Have a good rate. I think that's why you have the good rate. It's the people you choose to work
you
with.
Pick a good
generally
team,
make good stuff. Yeah,
100%. You're picking a good team. It's usually going to result in a good product, or at least you have that taste. But regardless, Austin, like, you're right, it isn't necessarily logical to perceive it that way, but I do feel like we had a lot of people mention in the comments that they played the Pathless because of you, and having a composer encourage people to play a game is pretty cool.
It's funny because that's just so not novel to me, because my whole childhood was like, oh, a new movie's out that Jerry Goldsmith scored, I'm gonna go see that movie, and then being horribly disappointed.
That's why you ended up you.
Well, that's
I think,
true.
But I think that's another thing that helps there is it's about visibility as well, though, right? One of the reasons that the audience knows Austin and looks for his name on the credits is, well, A, because of obviously things like this, doing show together, but before that, because your name's on the album, and I think that goes a long way. I think your name is out front in a way on a tertiary product. Like, someone likes a game, they put it on Spotify while they're at work or whatever, and they see your name come up. And I think that's the big one. Is just making it's really, I don't, other than like even an art book. An art book is going to have the work of lots of different people in it. The art director is probably going to take a step back. It's kind of one of those weird things of like, yeah, if the name's not out there, then we can't expect people to gravitate towards it, which is why directors, push to get their names above the credits, which is why actors get their names on the posters and have massive arguments about how their name is going to be placed on the poster and all that jazz. Like, yeah, it's about getting the name out.
To that end, one of my favorite examples of the kind of unintentional backfiring of the confirmation bias type thing that emerges from what you're talking about is, obviously, after Journey came out, I was the beneficiary of a lot of goodwill from people at large. And so maybe a year or two after that, so relatively shortly after Journey came out, I get a call from a guy who I kind of knew him because composers, the community is small enough that even if you haven't met someone, you've probably heard their name if they're around and actively engaging with people, even if they haven't done anything that you might have heard of, that, usually see people's names around, especially with Facebook. There's Facebook groups that are basically all composers and things. So a composer who I was not familiar with musically, but I'd seen his name, calls me up and he says, I'm working on a game and I feel like it's turning out really well. And we have a pretty narrow budget. And normally the stuff I've worked on, I've had basically no budget. So I always mixed stuff myself. But I feel like I'm going to be able to squeeze a little bit of budget out of this to hire a mixer. And I just thought I'd call to ask your advice on if you think that's a worthwhile use of resources in your experience, because this is, most of my friends only know about movies. As a fellow game person, what's your take on hiring a score mixer? And do you have someone you would recommend? And I said, I think it's extremely worthwhile if you can squeeze the money for it. And I got a guy who works really great, named Steve Kempster, and I would be thrilled to put you two in touch. And I'll tell him, this would be worth your time. So the composer was Gareth Coker, and the game was Ori and the Blind Forest. And so he gave me a special thanks, like at the bottom of like he got Moon Studios to include me in the block of special thanks.
Sure.
And to your point, as soon as that game came out, I started getting tweets of people going, I saw you in the credits. I didn't know you scored Ori. That's so cool. And I'm like, do you know how hard you had to look at Gareth's name prominently, music by, and then like an hour later in this wall of text of special thanks. And that's like
the
it's half
FedEx guy.
Yeah, I was going to say half of them are like the siblings and the parents of the developers and stuff, it's like, and so I was like, man, it's so funny how once you kind of got a thing in your head. I had the same thing happen to a far lesser degree, but I had a similar thing happen a number of times recently with Hades, because again, I contributed, at least there I actually did help in a more substantive way than answering a phone call and then writing an email. But I've gotten a lot of folks, oh my God, I had no idea you scored Hades. And I'm like, in no way did I score Hades. There's a certain amount of sweetness in your presumption. And it's like, oh, I knew it was good, and now I get why. And I'm like, that's very nice, woefully wrong. And also, I would never have written that score. I would have written something different. If you loved it, all hails to Darren Korb. So anyway, it's just one of those funny things that I've never experienced. I've never experienced a name jumping out where you're
they
like,
recognize it.
but they don't even notice like the context in which they recognize it.
And then they're like, composer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think
it's very funny.
It's sort of similar note, and I have no idea what I'm even going to do about this, but anything that Santa Monica Studios makes that people don't like, I will get blamed for. And I'm already so aware of that. If there is anything
I fully plan on blaming it.
It's going to happen.
That's
the
my
next
whole
Studio's
angle,
game, it's going to be like, because
I want to talk to you about games that were from 10 years ago.
All my fault, actually. Yeah, a lot of it's my fault. But I'm already so acutely aware of the fact that that's going to happen, even for things that I had absolutely nothing to do with. And I'm like, I guess I'll just take it. But then if I did do anything that was good, they would probably credit someone else. I'm just so aware of the reality of that pending on me. It'd probably be Mike Bithell get credit for it. Yeah,
usually I get credit for it.
Fuck's sake. Someone called you our resident socialist the other day, and I was like, he's...
business owner
I'm just as
Mike
much
Bithell.
of a socialist. Infuriating. But it is a weird thing to
comrades in
balance.
this, Alanah, it's fine.
Exactly.
I think to that end, when you mentioned something about Troy a second ago, when talking about Fortnite, you said Troy made me say that. It made me, because someone sent me their podcast over email the other day, and it was a link to the Apple podcast upload of their podcast, and I realized because I mostly use Spotify for that sort of thing, I don't ever look at Apple Podcasts. And I remember I was skimming through the reviews, and I had this sudden thought of, I've never actually seen our show, especially because I always hear you say, the audio version has a different title. So I jumped over and I looked us up, and I was perusing through the reviews, and side by side, it's hilarious. Most of them are very sweet. Like overwhelmingly people.
Everyone, go give us a nice review if you'd like. That'd be cool.
Yeah, give us a nice review on Apple.
My favorite side by side reviews were, I fucking love Troy Baker. I would listen to anything involving Troy Baker. Next one over. What the fuck is it with Austin, Mike, and Alanah that they have to suck Troy's dick every week? And it was so.
Wow.
It was so like.
I mean, I thought we had to do that. I thought that was one of the stipulations.
Not contractually. It's more of an unwritten.
It's how
rule.
we get him to stay around. We knew he'd have quit if he didn't do it. So it's how we got.
Actually, I would have quit if I didn't do it. So no, it was.
We did get some of that last week where it was like, this is infuriating. I'm getting very annoyed that you aren't talking about video games, and then every other comment is, oh, I really like the episode, so you don't talk about video games. And this is a thing that I've just learned over the course of my career, is that it's very difficult to actually take feedback from people on the internet, because it's in every direction at all times and people think completely opposite things. You kind of have to source it from peers. Because, and that's not to like discredit audiences. Like I always want the feedback, especially had some really useful stuff that I passed on to the audio editor that I've been using. I was like, can we try compressing the show? People in cars say that it's too loud or too quiet. And so he did that. And it's like people, without knowing that the compression was added, have been like, oh, the show sounds even better. And it's like, cool, great feedback, very helpful. But generally speaking, it's like, we just can't. Like, I just can't do anything to please 90,000 people who all feel very differently about Troy Baker and whether we suck him off too much.
Too much, by the way, is the qualifier.
Yeah, too much. Not that we do it or don't do it. It's
at
the
all.
degree.
It's just the limit to which you do it.
It's an analog
Is it too
concern, not
much?
a binary one. Yeah.
Whereas this is a more of a gassing up Austin episode. Clearly.
Little payback.
We all get a turn.
Eventually.
Yeah, I mean that's the funny thing. That's the I have to kind of skirt around some NDAs, but I was recently on a jury for awards considerations, and I was like, I don't when invariably The Last of Us comes up, I was like, I don't think I have I certainly don't technically have a conflict of interest, but I'm as close as you can get, I feel like, at this point on this one, that I have a real hard time speaking truly objectively, just given the amount of buy-in at this point that I've built in just with certain individuals. And it doesn't actually stop with our gentleman here. There are plenty of folks that I wish very well, and therefore it clouds my thinking. But
I had a similar thing recently
ways.
where somebody like on something like that criticized a voice performance of an actor that I'm friends with, not Troy, but whom I also dearly love, and I couldn't believe how much it hurt me. I was like, how dare you? Because I thought their performance was fantastic, but it also like hit me in a way to like have someone be like, fucking trash performance. I was like, oh my god, because like especially when you're hearing it and not reading it.
Rooms, right? Like if you're ever like, and it actually, like, as someone who's been nominated for lots of awards, I haven't won as many of them as I'd like, but I've been nominated. The knowledge that people have been that mean about stuff we've done in those rooms, because everyone's always a nightmare in those rooms. I've had to do the Troy opt out a couple of times where I've been on panels and I've had to quietly like duck out and be like, I like Troy, so I can't judge him on this.
I've always found this to be pretty true. There's a difference between having critical discourse, and saying, well, let's discuss this thing from either an academic or whatever, and just kind of water cooler shit talk.
Sure.
And people will only shit talk if they feel that they have an open audience. And by and large, that means that the person who is currently the receptor of the shit talk is also a purveyor.
Or if
of
they
shit
feel they
talk.
can get away with it.
Exactly.
If they feel like
It's
they have power in that room. But it's not always about the other person being an arsehole. It's often that the arsehole thinks that no one can stop them being an arsehole. We see that in all areas of life, right?
I mean, I love when people like unhinged criticize games. I have a friend who's also a writer, Jess Joho, who has opinions that I so staunchly disagree with, and will say like very opinionated stuff with no filter. And I love that she hasn't had it beaten into her that she should have a filter. We've been playing Red Dead Online for fun, and like she will be playing with us, and she'll just be like, "This video game's fucking trash," and I'm like, Jess, I disagree with you, but please continue. Like the fire which she expresses video game opinions like to her friends and openly, and a lot of the stuff she writes as well is like really refreshing, because it's so easy to be scared of people on the internet where video games are concerned, because the discourse can just be so vitriolic. And I'm like, don't change Jess Joho. Mashable Jess Joho. I think she's just at Jess Joho on all of social media, but a lot of very strong opinions.
I think especially in a super strong opinions that are not just knee-jerk sort of like meh, but actually coming from some place that's informed in some form or another. I can't really get into it, but I was on the same recent awards jury thing. I held back a little, but I definitely had one of those moments where I was like, look, I think this game I've got some major problems with this game. And I was pretty open and not trashing it, but like, I think that this thing fundamentally fails in its conceit. And I just cannot fathom how anybody could see it otherwise. And then it was so joyous to me is that then like 3 or 4 other people in the jury were like, here's exactly why you're wrong. Yeah. And with equal enthusiasm defending the game. And it, you know, they didn't change my opinion in that case, but it has been changed before. But they also did give me something to think about in a way that I was grateful for it. So I love that. The idea that you should be filtered or polite, I don't ascribe to at all, especially if you've thought a lot about it and you're like all worked up because you're just loaded with you know, you're
passion
loaded for bear.
is rad. Seeing people get passionate about things is cool. It sucks when it's like directed meanly at someone. Yeah, for sure. There's a game that I played recently called Before I Forget. I believe it's on PlayStation, definitely on PC.
What are you talking about?
I so want to talk about this game. You have no idea.
Oh, really? Well, yeah. It some of the reviews that I was reading were quite negative. There are a lot of fair criticisms of the game, but I feel like I took so much more away from it than other people because it does have themes that deal with dementia. And I have had family members who have dementia. So it's something that I felt like I was like, oh, wow, the way they did that particular thing was really powerful, or like, you know, this moment was really strong that I feel like other people didn't resonate with at all. And that one's obviously extremely subjective. And surely I'm sure they could have, you know, frame that game a little bit more educationally where that theme is concerned, but it was an interesting thing to read reviews and be like, oh, this actually like upset me playing this a little bit, where some other people were like, hated it, trash. Interesting. It's just like
upset
experience.
Meaning affected you, or upset meaning
no, just affected me. I wasn't like the video game is bad and then cried. It was oh wow, this made me think about,
spoke to you
know, just the context of this and how I would feel if I was going through this. So,
we probably don't have time today to do a proper breakdown of that, because that game specifically, of all the games that I've played in the last year, that one has given me the most sort of food for thought on the subject of what's your final assessment of a game when the game itself feels a little clunky. But what they are exploring is so potent, and they do it just well enough that it sticks with you, because, you know, they're not just saying, oh, here's our sci-fi story and our hero's journey and our whatever. Like that's a game explicitly made to gamify from a first person perspective the experience of like Alzheimer's, basically, or dementia. And it does it in a way that, you know, it puts you in that space, and it's frustrating and it's scary and it's all those things, and it really puts you there. But it's kind of like it's sort of like, for me, it's sort of this year's That Dragon Cancer, where it felt like probably really young developers, you know, who are taking, it's their most ambitious project that they
it's still only like 45 minutes. Everyone could just go play it. Totally.
Yeah.
I was about to ask, what did you play it on?
I played it on PC.
Steam.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll check it out.
It's legitimately a 45-minute game. It's, you know, I totally agree, Austin. It's a really interesting one to criticize, and I'm glad that I didn't have to review it, because there are things that feel like there are flaws with the game, but you're right that the potency of the theme is so strong. And I think expressed pretty well. I won't spoil it, but there's a particular thing that happens if you're like, you forget where something is. And I was like, oh, this is just very, very well done, and ties into the gameplay rather than just being a bunch of things I'm reading. A very difficult game to review, I would think. It would be vastly different depending on your experience.
What's the garden radio play? Do you see this? They're doing a special on Steam right now. Before I Forget plus the garden radio play.
It's another game by the same studio. Oh, a radio play.
Yeah, it must be. I'm going to check that out.
It's in the game. It's in the game. So it's like a radio play that's in the game. Is that right?
That's
Alanah?
just brilliant.
I don't remember.
I don't remember there being a radio play.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's DLC.
Maybe the game is that effective that we've forgotten it. And it's like it's really rewritten. That was
Alzheimer's
I love
research.
Mike's. I love Mike's like my temperature check on how gallows my humor can get.
Shakes his head. Yeah, it
When
probably
I-
is Alzheimer's and not dementia. That would probably be a more.
Well, they were specifically partnered with Alzheimer's Research UK.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that game, basically losing cognitive faculty is essentially my worst nightmare because there's very little to me other than that. I'm not like this great
That's
athlete or any, like, I'm not even in the realm of music. I don't consider myself much of a performer. You know, I like conducting concerts and little piano here and there, but there's 1,000 people better at both of those, to be blunt, especially piano. I really, to me, thinking, which writing music is essentially a function of thinking and dreaming. That's all that I am. I would, my lifestyle would be only fractionally altered if I was reduced to a Futurama floating head in a vat. And so to me, a game that explores what it's like for your brain to start breaking down its basic abilities to retain information and to is literally a game of my worst nightmare for myself. That
It was very sad.
I think there's also something interesting to explore there as far as there's also a lot of significant studies that have been done about how people who do have Alzheimer's can instantly sing again, play the piano again instantly, because there's something about their brain that processes music from a completely different standpoint. Also, people who severe autism, who maybe even nonverbal, are able to communicate that way. So music to me is fascinating. And I go back to what Alice Roberts said as far as like, there's a lot of studies to support the fact that we were singing before we were talking, that talking is actually a much more reductive form of communication. I just think that's
well,
a
and our
beautiful
speech,
notion.
the speech center of the brain is also a very specific part of the brain, whereas music is kind of crowdsourced over huge parts of the brain because you are drawing on a lot of parallel skill. That's a big part of why for childhood development, like K-5 music education is not about exposing kids to to music such that they might grow up and become more musical. Or people always make these very reductive arguments of, oh, well, you have to count rhythms, so maybe they'll be better at math. It's like, no. It makes you think better. It makes you retain information more powerfully because you're basically building pathways. Early on, your brain is creating all these pathways in itself. And when it's at its most plastic and its most malleable, the more pathways you build, the higher your cognitive capacity later in life will be. And music is one of those things that creates pathways everywhere. It by virtue of being able to do it. There's the Oliver Sacks book, Musicophilia, gets into a lot of these kinds of things, and he cites a lot of studies. And my favorite one was there was a patient, a patient who was suffering recurring severe seizures to the point that literally they were essentially in a continuous state of seizure indefinitely. Like they had a non-viable life effectively at this point, and they weren't a vegetable. They just couldn't get out of this state. And so it's like a waking nightmare, And so the extreme solution was essentially a lobotomy of half their brain. Wow. And they would still be able to do certain things and have, something vaguely resembling a normal life after. And the thing that was so fascinating was that the speech center was in the half of the brain that was lost. So the person lost the ability to speak for the rest of their life, but they could still sing as a way to communicate.
What?
And the thing that I found so amazing about that, and the question that I've always wanted to see if any neuroscientist has studied on the back of that revelation is, it's not such a hard line between singing and speaking a lot of time. Like listen to a lot of hip hop, for example. They're not speaking by any measure of, I would say. They're also not typically opera singers where there's very little that you could call speaking baked in it. Well, I'm not going to go down to the technical distinction I just made a mess of, but point being, it's kind of a gradation, right?
Yeah.
There's a spectrum from singing to speaking, and the idea of the brain surely has some point or a blurry little narrow band in which you've kind of made the leap where as you got more speaky as you sang, at some point you'd hit a floor you couldn't go past.
I wonder, what the limit is. It would probably be on an individual basis of what's too singy for you.
Les Miserables. That's probably it.
No, but I mean, like, in the case of that...
We are
in
just
the case
going
of
to talk at one note, and then it will sound like we're singing.
Well, so that comes from opera. That's called
there is
recitative,
brilliance
which is
in
what
that.
I was...
Come on.
I know, I love
trust
Les
me.
Mis. I love Les Mis. Like, embarrassing.
I've seen it too many times.
I've
Do
seen
any song.
Isn't
song
Pam
we
the
can sing
reason
right
you've
now,
seen
I
it
could
too
do
many times, though, Troy?
My wife has seen that movie. My wife has seen that a stage production of that at least 20 times.
I think I'm up to 3, I think.
We've done
are
4
rookie
in
numbers.
London.
Yeah, I was going to say...
It is good. I was gonna add the note. This is a very uncultured note in comparison. Of I've been criticized
excited.
before because people from Australia and the UK often, if we end a phone call, we sing. It's bye bye. All right, see you later. Oh, bye.
I mean, you do that here, so that's...
Yeah,
I do.
UK does
I'm
the
a
same
bye.
the
thing.
US
That's-
supposedly doesn't do that. You just
Bye.
say all right, bye. But we go bye.
Just hang up.
Goodbye.
And I don't know why it happens. We sing when we say goodbye.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Because we're generally
Bye now.
happy people.
Texas
That's what
does it. Everybody does it. There is a lyrical... We still sing. We speak at a certain pace. We typically speak at a certain key. Like if you were to listen to the notes, it's not atonal. There's very much of music to the way that we speak.
Yeah.
Is that a conscious thing for you as a professional speaker? Do you consciously think about the sing-song nature of speech? Is that something you turn off or on? Is that a tool that you're conscious of, or is that just, does that flow from character for you?
I would say in the same way that Austin can go back here and do this and know what notes he's going to hit, I would do the same thing with speaking. If I'm wanting to make a specific point, I'm going to speak at a specific pace. My pitch is going to go up or go down, but it's not going to be make sure you do this. In the same way that as using your voice as an acting tool, if someone says, hey, I need this to feel more menacing, that's typically going, the other side of the equal sign of that is going to be like, maybe we should go low, add some gravel to it. That's going to be more, there's certain qualities that we associate, certain musicalities to that vocal quality that we associate with certain characteristics or intention. But it's no longer, I think the second that I am consciously trying that, then it feels put on.
Yeah,
So
I've
it's
definitely
more
worked with
just-
actors who've had that kind of artificiality to the process, that
Yeah.
that I've given them some direction, like that flows from character or from story, and they'll come back with so higher pitched. It's like, that's always struck me as something that was a bit too mechanical. Like it's something that you can arrive at yourself, and kind of, it's an interesting thing. Yeah,
It's funny
Fun
how
as a
that...
director to just go, let's try that and see what happens. Okay, that's not giving it to me. Let's try something different.
As
yeah,
a-
of course, yeah.
As a flip on that, like the same scenario but with the opposite solution, I have been conducting orchestras so many times where I'll hear, some feature of what they played, and I'll say, okay, let's do it again, and let me just try to add some context that might be helpful. It's a scene where this couple who've been, hating each other for the whole time, they're finally finding this moment of reconciliation. And so we're kind of cracking through the exterior and getting into the meat of their real intent and how they actually feel about it, how they actually care. The concertmaster say, so louder?
Faster,
And,
more energy.
and invariably I'm like, yeah, louder.
Yeah, louder. I've found a lot of times in sessions, and I must unfortunately wrap up, but I have found in sessions a lot of times the simple act of externalizing the notion for the sake of the room frames it in context to where I could literally do the exact same take and people are like, that's it. They just needed to hear themselves say it. Like they literally could have been in the moment where they go, I never thought about this, but he's not angry, he's afraid. And if you listen back to it,
That makes
they
total
can
sense.
textualize it themselves. So I think that as funny as it is to like go into the pathos of the moment and try to as you say, crack that and evoke this beautiful imagery, is like, so you want us to play it faster then?
Yeah.
I love how
We
you're,
have a term-
I love
we
how
have
you're
a
picturing it
term
as a London musician.
that idea of like direction that happens at the moment of saying it and kind of realizing what you mean through the act of communicating it is a thing that we have a term for internally that I cannot say on the podcast. I've just realized. I'll tell it to you after we stop recording. I can't. I've just
right.
realised I've done an awful thing there. I apologise.
And on that
Bethelian.
note,
Yeah, on that note, we should end the show so we can find out what this term is.
Yeah.
But actually, because we have to, so I'm going to
So
say
evil.
goodbye.
Goodbye.
bye now. Y'all see you later.